Hello and welcome to Technique Question Entry 3 with Vince from VitaPod.
Hey Safa, happy to be here.
What is the VitaPod?
At the simplest level, the VitaPod is an artificial womb system
that can safely gestate a human from very early development through birth equivalent readiness outside the human body. At the real level, it's infrastructure. It's a replacement for one of the most failure-prone, inequitable, and biologically expensive processes civilization still relies on. Pregnancy today is heroic, but it's also risky, unevenly distributed, and wildly inefficient at scale. Some people sail through it, others don't. The VitaPod turns reproduction from an act of biological luck into a controlled, monitored, repeatable process. More like neonatal intensive care moved upstream. We didn't invent care, we industrialized it.
So are you trying to replace pregnancy?
No, we're trying to replace avoidable harm. People who want to carry shouldn't be able to. People who can't, or shouldn't have to risk their lives to, shouldn't be locked out of parenthood. The VitaPod doesn't erase pregnancy. It gives civilization a second, safer path. If aviation exists, walking doesn't disappear. But you stop pretending everyone needs to cross oceans on foot.
Why is this your craft?
Because reproduction is the quiet choke point of modern civilization. Every system, education, labor, pensions, geopolitics, assumes a future population that we are no longer reliably producing. Meanwhile, we accept staggering loss and trauma as natural simply because we've always done it this way. My craft isn't babies. It's making fragile, sacred things scalable without making them cold. I don't see this as biotech first. I see it as civil engineering for the human future. Same mindset as clean water, antibiotics, or electricity. Things that once felt unnatural and now feel immoral not to provide.
Isn't this playing God?
If preventing preventable death is playing God, then medicine crossed that line centuries ago. We already intervene at every step. IVF, C-sections, incubators, hormones. The only difference here is honesty. We stopped pretending nature always knows best and started asking what outcomes we are actually responsible for.
Who are your customers, and what's a real story that explains it?
Well, our customers fall into three overlapping groups. First, people who want children but face medical, biological, or situational barriers, high-risk pregnancies, infertility, same-sex couples, single parents by choice. Second, healthcare systems and governments staring down demographic collapse and exploding maternal care costs. Third, societies that quietly depend on women absorbing risk so everyone else can pretend reproduction is cheap. A real story? One of our early families had lost 2 pregnancies late. Perfect care, perfect behavior, still lost. When they used VitaPod, for the first time, the experience wasn't terror disguised as joy. It was calm, monitored, predictable. They told us, this is the first time we got to be parents before the baby arrived. That's when it clicked. We weren't just saving lives, we were changing what parenthood feels like.
But isn't this only for elites?
At first, everything new is. Dialysis was elite, IVF was elite, smartphones were elite. Then scale kicks in. Standardization kicks in. Costs collapse. Our entire model is built around making this boringly accessible. The moral failure would be inventing this and not driving it down to mass availability.
What does this mean for the future of humanity?
It means reproduction stops being destiny and starts being designable. It means fewer parents choosing between career, health, and family, fewer countries panic importing labor because they can't sustain populations, fewer women carrying disproportionate physical cost for a collective outcome. Long term, this is how you stabilize civilizations without coercion. You don't force people to have children, you remove the penalties for doing so.
And what scares you the most if this doesn't exist?
That we normalize decline. That we keep telling ourselves shrinking societies are inevitable while ignoring tools that would make flourishing easier. The scariest future isn't dystopia, it's resignation.
How does a VitaPod actually work, end to end?
Well, think of the VitaPod as a closed-loop life support system, but for development instead of survival. Once embryonic development reaches a viable transfer point, usually after very early formation, the VitaPod takes over the functions the human body normally provides. Oxygen exchange, nutrient delivery, waste removal, temperature regulation, and hormonal signaling. But unlike a human body, it does this with constant visibility. Every parameter is monitored, adjusted, and logged. If pregnancy is like flying through clouds with occasional instrument checks, VitaPod is flying with a full glass cockpit and autopilot redundancy. Nothing mystical, just physiology, externalized and stabilized.
What makes this safer than traditional pregnancy?
Well, traditional pregnancy asks one body to do everything. Circulation, immune modulation, structural support, while also living a full life. The VitaPod separates those loads. There's no blood pressure spike, no gestational diabetes cascade, no late nights, is this normal, uncertainty. If something drifts, we correct it early, before it becomes a crisis. It's like the difference between cooling a data center with open windows versus precision HVAC. Same goal, radically different reliability.
And what happens if something goes wrong mid-gestation?
This is where people underestimate how much medicine already intervenes, just later. In VitaPod, intervention happens upstream. Nutrient balance can be tuned, environmental stressors removed, developmental pacing adjusted. And if a complication arises, you're not racing an ambulance against biology. You're already inside the system designed to handle variants. We don't promise perfection, we promise earlier margins and calmer responses.
How do parents interact with the process?
Parents aren't sidelined, they're brought closer. They receive continuous updates, developmental milestones, and visualizations that are actually understandable. They can hear heart rhythms, see movement, and participate in care decisions without being in a constant state of anxiety. Emotionally, it's closer to tending a greenhouse than surviving a storm. Still profound, just less terrifying.
How does this integrate with hospitals and existing healthcare?
The VitaPod doesn't replace hospitals, it plugs into them. Clinics oversee transfers, hospitals handle oversight and final delivery transition. Neonatal teams already understand the physiology, we've simply shifted timelines and tools. Think of it like how outpatient surgery changed hospitals. Same institutions, smarter load distribution.
Is the child different in any meaningful way?
No, except in outcomes. The biology is the same, the difference is environmental consistency. Fewer stress hormones, fewer emergency interventions, more stable development. If anything, it's closer to ideal conditions than what many pregnancies experience today. We're not altering humanity, we're giving it better lighting, cleaner air, and fewer alarms.
What does scale actually look like?
Well, at scale, the VitaPod looks boring, and that's the goal. Standardized units, regional hubs, integration with public healthcare systems, costs falling as production increases, just like dialysis machines or imaging scanners. The end state isn't exclusivity, it's ubiquity. The moment you stop arguing about it and start scheduling it, that's when you know it worked.
And how would you address faith-based concerns that see this as crossing a line?
Well, every major medical advance has been accused of violating the natural order. Anesthesia, transfusions, IVF, even incubators. In each case, the line moved not because beliefs weakened, but because suffering became harder to justify. The VitaPod doesn't replace faith. It reframes responsibility. Most faith traditions already accept medicine when it preserves life, reduces harm, and honors intent. We're not manufacturing life. We're safeguarding it when the alternative is risk we've simply learned to tolerate out of habit. And importantly, this is optional. Faith is preserved precisely because coercion is absent. Choosing to protect the child more effectively doesn't negate reverence, it often deepens it.
Economically, isn't this destined to be elitist?
At first, yes, like every complex technology in history. But the economic arc here is counterintuitive. Pregnancy complications are expensive. Emergency care, NICUs, long-term disability support, society already pays, just inefficiently and unevenly. The VitaPod shifts costs forward to eliminate downstream burden. That's why insurers, governments, and public systems get interested quickly. Over time, this becomes less like concierge care and more like vaccination, something you don't argue about, you budget for. Elitism isn't the end state. Underutilization of safer systems is.
Why take such a consumerized approach to something this serious?
Well, because seriousness doesn't require suffering to be authentic. Hospitals are optimized for crisis, families are not. When people are anxious, overwhelmed, or excluded from understanding, outcomes worsen. Consumerization here means clarity, dignity, and agency, not trivialization. It's the same reason modern cockpits are user-friendly and why complex finance tools now come with dashboards. If this is going to be a normal part of life, it has to be navigable, not ceremonial or punishing.
Why is this inevitable for a multiplanetary species?
Space is hostile to biology. Radiation, microgravity, supply constraints, and delayed emergency care makes traditional pregnancy untenable beyond Earth. You can't build a multiplanetary civilization on fragile, high-risk biological processes that require constant emergency intervention. Externalized gestation isn't a sci-fi luxury, it's infrastructure. Like pressure vessels, closed-loop life support, or orbital habitats. Humanity is serious about permanence beyond Earth. So we need reproduction systems that are as robust as our habitats.
Do you have any case examples to share?
One case is that we see couples in their early 40s who are deeply committed to having children but face elevated medical risk. Traditional pregnancy could be a gamble with cardiovascular strain, metabolic challenges, and other age-related complications. VitaPod removes that physiological burden entirely, allowing parents to pursue genetically related family formation without putting life or health on the line. It turns what was medically discouraged into a supported, manageable path. The point isn't just safety, it's also agency. People shouldn't have to choose between the timing of their life and the feasibility of parenthood. VitaPod preserves the natural connection to one's child while reframing the risk equation. It's about giving families the chance to plan with confidence, not compromise.
That wraps up the third entry of Technique question. Thank you for your attention. Cheers. Thanks for doing this, Vince.
Happy to be here.
On the way out, be sure to pop by the store at techniquestion.com.
Another case is that many single parents, especially those pursuing professional trajectories, face a stark choice. Have a child and shoulder high-risk pregnancy, or defer parenthood and compromise life goals. The VitaPod decouples parenthood from the physical toll that disproportionately falls on women. The system doesn't replace caregiving, it preserves health, income, and energy so that being a parent doesn't demand sacrifice as the default. This is really about equality of opportunity. Parenthood becomes a matter of deliberate choice, not one dictated by biology or timing. By removing the high-risk element, the VitaPod allows single parents to embrace the full spectrum of family life without the calculus of what am I willing to risk? Because there's no gamble. Another case is that some parents carry genetic predispositions or chronic conditions that make pregnancy dangerous, but have no bearing on their ability to parent. The VitaPod lets these families separate caregiving capacity from biological vulnerability. It turns what was once a near impossible decision into a straightforward one. You can have a child without endangering your life. This is about preserving dignity and choice. Families shouldn't have to forego parenthood simply because biology is unforgiving in one dimension. The VitaPod reframes risk, providing a controlled, predictable environment where life and family can flourish safely. It honors both the desire to have children and the imperative to protect life.